Hey, I'm Bradley Tusk. Thank you guys for coming. This is my bookstore. And we are the very, very proud neighbors of Russ and Daughters, and really honored and excited that we got to be part of Russ and Daughters Day. And so my thought with Niki and Josh is I'm going to kind of ask them 3 categories of questions, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys, and you ask them whatever you want. First category I want to do is sort of their lives growing up in this institution. Second is the book itself, and then the third is the business today. So I guess my first thing I was wondering about is, like, what are your earliest memories of the store? And is it the kind of thing where, like, you grew up behind the counter, or is it the kind of thing where, like, you just showed up once in a while and said, oh, we own that? Yeah.
So I grew up a shop kid, because Russ and Daughters was a literal mom and pop to me, because it was my mother and my father who ran the shop for 30 years before we took over. So even though our family home is in Brooklyn, I also feel like I grew up on the Lower East Side. One of my earliest memories, I think I was probably 5 or 6, was my first job, quote unquote, which I gave to myself. And I would stand at the door to the shop, and our shop has one set of doors. So everything and everyone comes through those doors. The customers, the deliveries, the packages, in and out all day long. So I would stand by the door and I would wait specifically for the produce delivery guys. And they would wheel in on their hand trucks 50-pound sacks of whatever we had ordered. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and I would climb up top, and I would sit on the top sack, and I would direct them to our kitchen and storage in the back. And I felt very useful. I thought without my direction, they would surely get lost. But if you know our store, there's no way to get lost. But I grew up. From the time I spent there, I knew what my parents did for a living, which I think was a very formative, part of my education. And I also, I think, absorbed that there was something magical happening in this small space, the way that all of humanity came through and coexisted in the space, and the interaction that happened over food. And I also thought, until I was pretty old, that you were supposed to walk into a store and hug and kiss the shopkeeper, because that's what happened in our shop.
Yeah. Josh, what about you?
Little different. Like you said, I grew up in an ashram upstate, so I was running around barely clothed, the guru, and learning Sanskrit and yoga. But we'd come into the city a couple times a year and stop by the store before we went to either Niki's house or my grandmother's house in Gramercy. And it couldn't have been more of a foreign experience, really. I mean, imagine the ashram kid, running around with a bunch of hippies and walking into this Lower East Side New York store. So I have these vivid memories of walking into the store, and all the employees are like, oh, hi, want to say hello and everything. And I'd sneak behind the candy counter and fill my pockets full of hard candies that I thought I was stealing, but it was sanctioned. So quite a different experience. But and then we'd go and eat the spreads at my grandmother's house, and me and my cousin, who also grew up upstate, would load everything on the table onto our bagel and get yelled at by our grandmother. Like, how could you taste anything? All the fish, the herring, the cream sauce, everything on top.
So, I mean, for everyone here, Russ and Daughters is a cultural institution. But for you guys, it was just, especially you, Niki, like just your life. So at what point did it occur to you, like, oh, this isn't just my family's business and kind of where I go, but like it has this greater significance?
I think because it became clear, because anytime you say Russ and Daughters to someone, they immediately perk up and they have a story to tell. And so I think I sort of just cumulatively understood that it meant something to a lot of people. But I think it really dawned on me when, after college, I decided to move to San Francisco, in part because I figured, that was how I could get the farthest away from Russ and Daughters and the Lower East Side without leaving the country. And I moved there without ever having been, without, I had a place to stay for 3 weeks, didn't have a job, that kind of thing. And this family that hosted me, who my father met in the store and were kibitzing, talking in the store, and after 10 minutes, they offered to have me live with them. The first day I got there, the mother asked if I could go and run some errands with her. And of course. So we get in the car, and she drives up Fillmore Street, and she stops in front of a vacant storefront. And she says, "So this is where I think you should open Russ & Daughters West." And I was 21 years old, and that was the last thing in my mind. But it was, and then I got a job actually at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and my boss had been the director of the Whitney before that. And I thought that I was hired on my own merits until I realized that he figured out that he could get an order quicker through me. And that was pretty sobering.
And so, and Josh, obviously, you didn't grow up with it in the same way. So what brought you back into the family business?
Yeah, it's interesting because, the idea of Russ & Daughters as this institution and such an important part of the fabric of New York hadn't really occurred to me, but I was working in semiconductors in the Pacific Northwest and thinking about this side of my family and our grandmother, who was a real matriarch of the family and held us together in a way. I was thinking about what she did with her life, and I just became really curious and wanted to know more about that. And then I was working in this business that had no real connection to people. So there wasn't that passion behind it. And I started thinking about the store, which is what our grandmother did with her life, and how important these little specialty shops are to our nation. Mind you, New York, I'm out there, shopping in strip malls and these big stores. So the significance of Russ & Daughters started taking shape for me when I was like, what are we losing in this country? And it's moving to bigger and bigger brands and bigger stores, and this mom and pop shop idea is what's being lost. So it became more significant to me personally and what I thought the nation was losing. And then coming here is when I really sort of understood, like, I'd go out and they'd be like, "All right, what are you doing?" "Oh, well, I work at Russ & Daughters. I'm, the fourth generation." Everyone's like, "Oh my God." Which is a lot.
And so, you did you end up folding and opening Russ & Daughters West, or like something ultimately dragged you back in, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think subconsciously I felt a pull to come back without even realizing it. And it took a while. It took about 7 years. I had a few other kind of career paths that I thought I was going to do. And then when I got to the bottom of the list and I really started to have my own kind of, take stock for myself, I realized a couple things. I realized that whereas I had previously thought that if I ended up doing what my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents had done, that I was going to be a failure, so to speak. We're so programmed with this American, like, individualist ethos that you have to go and, like, do your own thing, and you have to do something, quote-unquote, better than the previous generation. And I had that idea, and I needed to kind of shed myself of that to actually flip the script and realize I'm part of a legacy. I'm part of something that has lasted this long and holds a lot of, value. And I can try to, there's a way that you can try to, I thought I could try to keep tradition. I could try to maintain this history, but I could also help it to move forward. And it was that kind of shift in my understanding that really freed me to decide, oh, this is actually what I want to do, not because I'm expected to.
So this one may be a little bit of a weird question. I tend to ask weird questions. I apologize. But so New York City just is ever changing, right? And it's different. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's worse. you have this institution that in some ways evolves, but in some ways you want to preserve the culture of it because it's so successful. How much do you feel like through the store you see the evolution of New York City, or for you guys, is it like a constant? And if that doesn't make sense, you don't have to answer.
No, it makes total sense, and it's something that we talk about and think about a lot because Russ and Daughters, this 111-year-old business, is so important to New York, and we really want to keep it as much the same as possible. Mind you, it just can't work if we kept, like Niki and I came into the business, they were writing orders on these triplicate forms. So if someone called for their holiday order from last year, we literally had to go into the basement and search through boxes. And sometimes the boxes weren't labeled, so it was searching through a lot of boxes. So changing things, mind you, changing things when we came into the business at the original stores was nearly impossible. And like one small business being run in the same way for so long is like, to change that is like turning a super tanker.
Was it culturally, and you don't have to call anyone by name, but like, did you feel like you were sort of having to sort of change the mindset of people who would say, we always do it this way?
Yes. And the mindset of the owner at the time, who was Niki's father, the conversation about a POS was like a fight, basically. I was thinking about this the other day in one of our talks. The conversation about Niki and I talking about the brand of Russ and Daughters. Mark was like, "What do you mean brand?" He's like, "What's a brand?" I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, how do you represent the business? That's the brand.
Bradley, I think it's actually a great question because Russ and Daughters is so enmeshed in New York, and because the city changes so much, we kind of see ourselves as stewards of trying to keep some things the same and being this continuous presence. For example, when Josh and I were thinking of opening a restaurant, Russ and Daughters Cafe, which is just down the block from where we are. This was for 100 years, it was just the store, right? And then here we are, these two crazy cousins who had no restaurant experience, thinking that we could somehow open a restaurant. It seemed very obvious to us initially that if we were going to expand, that of course we would expand to a different neighborhood. We'd been on the Lower East Side for 100 years, time to go somewhere else. And we were we were about to sign a lease for a space in Chelsea. Oh, yeah.
We'll edit that out of the podcast.
Yeah. Dirty little secret. And it was the night before we were going to sign this lease, and I started to have second thoughts. And just as I'm having second thoughts, Josh calls me and he says, "This doesn't feel right." And we started talking about it, and in that moment, it crystallized for us that Russ and Daughters Cafe had to be on the Lower East Side because this city and this neighborhood in particular has changed so much. Russ and Daughters is a touchstone for people to connect with, their own past, their own New York lives. And so as the neighborhood loses, more and more of these kind of places of character and history, we realized, actually, we have an obligation to stay in this neighborhood. So.
All right, so let's turn to the book. So, for whatever reason, for over a century, there was a choice to keep all of the secrets very, very closely guarded, right? And then all of a sudden that changed. So there was clearly some sort of aha moment between the two of you that produced that. What was it?
I mean, the reality of, a recipe is a recipe. The secretness of a recipe is the idea that it's kept secret. Whitefish salad, we add baked salmon. And yes, it's not like a secret ratio of spices, right? The secret to what we do is to make stuff fresh, make stuff with love, and sell it quickly. And that goes for everything that we do. The idea of the secret recipe, I think, was sort of an illusion or like an idea, like to build the story of Russ Daughters. It's a 111-year-old place, so when you come in and have this amazing experience, part of that experience is stepping into a shop that's been around for 100 years, to interacting with these the counter people, that it's this Russ and Daughters experience, indescribable thing that contributes to the enjoyment of the food. So in talking about doing a book, it wasn't like, oh my God, we're going to release the secret sauce. I mean, some recipes are particular to Russ and Daughters, but that's not what makes us who we are, really.
We had the idea for a long time, but it wasn't until COVID that we found ourselves with some more time. We had 2 restaurants at the time. They were both shut down. The thing that was really keeping us going was shipping and our local delivery. And so we realized, well, once we got past the sort of the lowest of the lows, we thought, well, let's take advantage of this moment and actually, do a book. And from the beginning, we wanted to make something that was more than a cookbook. So yes, there are over 100 recipes, there are guides, it's a very practical tool, but it's also full of, we want to tell the story and share the history and talk about some of the family struggles. And you hear from, some of our customers' voices are in here. And in so doing, the hope is that our readers, our customers, can see their own story reflected back to them.
I was just going to say, if someone takes that book and wants to cook everything they've always gotten from Russ and Daughters, more power to you, and I'd love to have a conversation with you, but I don't know who that person is.
Well, actually, you asked about secrets, and in a way, we weren't really, there weren't any secrets we're revealing, because a lot of these recipes we had to reverse engineer for a home cook. Because you can imagine, we're making bagels, like we bake almost 5,000 bagels a day. When we make babka, we're making a batch of 100 babkas at a time. So that doesn't work for somebody at home. And so we had to, and also, a home baker, a home cook doesn't have access typically to commercial equipment, a proofing room, a rotating deck oven. And so we had to really adapt it for, to serve 4 to 6 as opposed to like 40 or 60. Right. And also we debated a lot. Like a lot of our recipes, it's old school, right? We make a real New York bagel. That's a process that takes 2 days. And we debated, like, should we make this easier for somebody at home? There are ways to cut corners, but you kind of cut quality. And we realized, no, we want people to know what it really takes to make these foods.
And how much of I don't know if it's an urban myth or if it's true, you'll know the answer to this, which is the New York bagel, and also pizza for the same reason, is so delicious in part because our water is unique and therefore no one can replicate it. Is that true, or is that just something that's fun to say?
It's true and false. There is a specific pH to our water and a minerality to New York water that I think does make our bagels and pizzas particularly delicious. But I think when it comes to, I can speak for bagels, the craft, the work that I just described, that takes, it's a lot of, once bagels became popular, they also became more mass produced. And so what people started to think of a bagel, out west was a lender's bagel, and so I think that warped the general public's understanding of a bagel, and New York stayed kind of committed in large part to making a New York bagel. That has changed. So in New York, unfortunately you can find a lot of pretty terrible bagels too, but the flip side of that is I think there is a renaissance now of people who are around the country, around the world, who are getting interested in making quote-unquote real bagels.
So can you, either of you, name, because this is maybe the most important question of the podcast, when we're not in New York City and we want a real bagel, what is worth having?
Actually, I was just in Akron, Ohio. I was there to fulfill a dying man's wish. No exaggeration. So this was a beloved customer of ours. Sorry, I'm going to get to the answer about the bagel. But
After a few tears.
there was a beloved customer of ours from Akron who was a regular, ordered all the time. And we formed a friendship. I would take his Yom Kippur order every year. He told me that one day I'd love for you to come out to Akron and speak to my community. And I sort of said, sure, of course. He passed away unexpectedly. Several months later, his family called and said, we'd like you to come to Akron to fulfill our father's wish. And he had, in fact, started, unbeknownst to me, making plans for this event. So I went, and it was 200 people, and we shipped out Russ Daughters, smoked fish and cream cheese and whitefish salad and herring for 200 people. But it was cost prohibitive to ship 200 bagels, and so the family said, we'll have to get something locally. I have to say, and they went from Akron to Cleveland, and they got bagels in Cleveland. Cleveland bagels, shout out, because they were actually quite good. Surprisingly.
So if anyone here is in Cleveland, now you know where to go. The last question on the book, and then we'll get to the business, which is just, okay, writing a book is like hard, right? It's a process. How'd you enjoy it? What surprised you about it? Would you want to write another one?
Writing a book is not as bad as owning a restaurant, but it's pretty challenging. We had a great writing partner in Joshua David Stein. It was amazing, and we spent a lot of time with him. Maybe got to know a little too much about him. It was challenging, and for us to sit down and talk to him about all that we've done, and then to read how he translated our voice was a very new experience, and it was pretty great. And we think he did a really good job in speaking in our voice in this book.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest parts was just trying to think about how we structured this, because it's 111 years worth of stuff, and I think it took a while. But when we landed on the idea that the book could be structured in a way to represent or reflect the evolution of Russ Daughters, and the recipes that fall within each category, that's when it really kind of clicked. So the book starts with the store, the original store, and the recipes that originated there, and then it goes to the cafe. So it's all the main dishes, the desserts, the cocktails, and egg creams and sodas, and then our bakery. We have our main bakery is in Brooklyn, and that's where we're making all the bagels and babka and bialy. Somehow they all start with the letter B, and so in so doing, we realized we kind of kill two birds with one stone in terms of organizing the recipes and also telling the arc of our story.
All right, so the business itself, like I don't ever remember going in and it not being pretty crowded, but now it's, because I'm down here a lot, I mean, there's a line around the corner every single time I walk by. What happened?
Well, the neighborhood changed quite a bit, even from the time that I started 23 years ago. And the knowledge of Russ Daughters, I think, has grown. And part of growing a business is growing your reach. But we were always in guides and travel guides and all these things, but it just seems to be more and more and more. Lots of tourists. The people who shop at Russ Daughters also have grown. It was a Jewish business selling Jewish food for Jewish people, Jewish employees, and now it's a New York institution that everyone wants to go to.
But the funny thing is there's actually no line, because when you go to the store, we do it old school. You take a paper number ticket, and the store is so tiny that you put 6 people in there and it feels busy. So there is kind of but I think what happens is that people end up just congregating in and around the store, and so it always seems like it's so busy, but really the nice thing is if there is a wait, you can just wait for go and take a walk, and then your
What
number gets called.
What we need now is a young Russ to sit on top of the produce deliveries.
Yeah.
Part
They
the
could buy
seas
books.
of customers.
Yeah.
No, part to get the people
Yeah.
out of the way to get the deliveries,
Yeah.
which is a challenge now.
What's the long-term vision for the business? Like when you guys think about, like, go with both what you kind of think will happen over the next 25 years, but then one of you give me your wildest dreams.
Well, my wildest dream is that there's someone from the next generation, whether it's one of our kids or their cousins, who feel moved to raise their hand and to want to do this work, and so that Russ and Daughters can continue for a 5th generation. That's our hope, but we don't want to traumatize our children.
Well, it may be one of the only non-AI jobs left. So
This is true. This is true. Yeah, you can't really tell ChatGPT to make a bagel, right?
Yeah.
In a way, it's a wild dream because it would make life much easier if we knew what our end goal was going to be, but we don't because our kids are too young, and so we kind of operate in a way just like with that hope.
Right. So what do you? And this is a problem you have to worry about for a while. But let's fast forward 20 years. All of the kids are sort of age to make this choice, and for whatever reason, all of them choose not to. Do you sell it or do you just close it down?
Seriously?
My father did this to me. He was at that point.
Right. Well, because you could see an argument to say we don't want to tarnish the legacy in any way, and some private equity fund that'll give us a 20x, whatever. Like it's just not. They're not going to do what we believe is right.
This is not a question that is going to be answered here, I don't think.
Okay.
Selling it or closing it. But in back to the sort of one of the original questions of how do we see the next 25 years is Niki and I took over, and this growth that's happening has been sort of an organic thing. So we don't sit down and figure out what are we going to do in the next 10 years beyond running a very tight, clean business. So we're not like, oh, we're going to have 4 more stores and this and that. And, like weirdly, we've gone from like, oh, we should open in another big market in the U.S. to like, oh, wow, that would be complicated to be in L.A. and one of us would have to be, that's how we do it. One of us would have to be there a significant amount of time. What does that do to our lives? And so maybe that's not going to happen right now, but maybe there's another store in New York. But ultimately, I think we're realizing more and more that the brand integrity, the strength of the Russ and Daughters brand is what's really important to us, and we're just going to look after that.
In a way, I think because we're a 4th generation family business that hopes to survive for another 4 generations, we operate in a way that's, I think, counter to most businesses, because we look very long, very down the road, and in so doing, I think we're less motivated by just sort of making quick decisions to grow as much as possible. And it's really, there's a level of restraint and I think a healthy fear of not wanting to lose the magic that is Russ and Daughters. And that's why we actually say no more. Like we get, offered things every week and we say no. And it's only when there have been opportunities that we realized, oh, we can't say no to this one, that we've done it.
All right, I've asked more than enough questions, so let me open it up to you guys. Who has a question?
Niki, in all your years in the store, what have you seen in food trends? Like when you were younger, things that were popular and aren't now, or have faded away, things that you didn't have before that now you have. Like how has the changing of New York affected what you have in the store?
Well, a funny story is about baksa. Does anyone know what baksa is? Okay, it's spelled Buxar, but you don't pronounce the R. Don't ask me why. Baksa is dried carob pods. And in the shop growing up, there was a barrel next to the candy counter. And inside were these desiccated brown kind of crescent-shaped pods.
Delicious.
And it was like the Jewish version of the water cooler, except as a child, I would look at these men who I thought were very old men standing around this barrel, and they would gnaw on these pods. And it was sort of like almost like tobacco, chewing tobacco, but they were baksa pods. Yeah, it turns out that they're a really good laxative, and that's why you'd find prunes and baksa at Russ Daughters. But I didn't know this. And then fast forward, we're opening a restaurant, and I have it in my mind that I'm going to bring back baksa. Except what do you do with this, right? And we played around with it and realized that we could make a syrup out of it and make a baksa egg cream. So at Russ Daughters Cafe, you can get the classic, chocolate egg cream, but we had until recently a baksa egg cream. And I was like, I am bringing back this food. And all these people are going to feel so nostalgic when they see baksa on the menu. Well, it turns out nobody remembered what baksa was. And the servers were always frustrated because they had to explain this to every person.
It was good. It was good. It tasted good. And even with my ashram trauma around carob, I thought it was good, but no one ever bought it. So, but to simply answer your question, even in my tenure in 23 years, again, we were mostly serving Jewish customers. So pickled lox, belly lox, whole whitefish were, flying off the shelves, and those are becoming less and less every year. Less and less people get those things, which is interesting. We still have them, and we think it's important to have them, but it's a big shift, particularly for the Jewish holidays. We'd sell hundreds and hundreds of whole whitefish, and now we're not selling nearly as many.
What was on your kitchen table, either for Friday night or for high holidays? Were just leftovers what was left over, or did you have different whole menu for your house?
You know that saying, like the cobbler's children have no shoes? Yeah, it's like the appetizing children have no locks. So because my parents worked so hard and they were at Russ Daughters all day, it was kind of like the last thing they wanted to bring home, except if we had, guests over. So I really had to kind of go to the shop to have our food. And Yom Kippur, you can imagine, Erev, so the Jewish, break fast, right? That's one of our busiest times of the year because our food is classically what people eat to break the fast. I know you're doing this next week, Bradley, right? You got your order in? It's in. I heard your mom, she gave some direction to, make sure the order was correct. So growing up, my parents worked like mad. My brother and I were expected to help out working for the busy periods like Yom Kippur. And then everyone was just exhausted. And it was the last thing you wanted to have, right? And knowing that the whole world is eating our food, but so we would always not have Russ Daughters. But the one tradition we did have that I still do now with my family is for New Year's Eve, because we're also, caviar is a big part of what we do. And we would, on New Year's Eve, break open a tin of caviar. And very simple, right? You really don't need to do much. Just some caviar, creme fraiche, some blinis or potato chips. And it was just this quiet, beautiful moment over something really delicious that always, and it was at the very end of a very long, busy holiday season. But it was always this kind of reminder of, oh, wow, this is what's special. And it doesn't have to, it can be this very personal, intimate thing over foods that really mean something.
Hi, I had a question about the name of your business. Was it always called Russ and Daughters? And was there pushback that it was daughters and not sons?
Can I take this question?
Can you take it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Because I love talking about this. So Russ and Daughters is the first business in this country with "and Daughters" in its name. But that was not the original name. There were two other names. So the shop, we date ourselves from when our great-grandfather opened the store, which was 1914. So, and he changed the name in 1935 to Russ and Daughters. So in between, it was called Russ's Cut Rate Appetizers, because there were so many other shops like his just on the Lower East Side. So I guess he had to compete and be cut rate. And then it was J. Russ National Appetizing, which is hilarious because there was nothing national about what he was doing. It's like feeding the other Jewish immigrants of the neighborhood. At some point, he needed help, and he looked at his family. He had no sons, but he had 3 daughters. Our grandmother, Anne, and her 2 sisters all started working at the age of 10, 11. But by 1935, he realized that they were actually very good for business. He was not he would have hated the word like hospitality or customer service. He was very grumpy, but his daughters were lovely. So he changed the name to Russ and Daughters, and there was indeed a lot of pushback. People thought what a ridiculous thing to do when you have a reputable business to tarnish it with this name. There are also customers, we have customers to this day who are in their late 90s who tell me that growing up they always thought that there was a Mr. Russ and a Mr. Daughters. So while I want to think of my great-grandfather as a pioneering feminist, I also know that had there been a son, it would have been Russ and Sons. But I'm so glad that he didn't, and we're very proud to, even in 2025, it is still incredibly rare to see a business with "and Daughters."
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Can I just take a moment, because I want to thank everyone at P&T Knitwear for putting on this tremendous day. This is more than a bookstore. This is really a community space that does so much. And we talked about how this neighborhood has changed so much, how we've lost so many small businesses. And I was so happy when P&T came back to the Lower East Side and opened here. And I say came back because it had a former life.
Yep.
On Allen Street. Bradley's grandfather opened a knitwear store. He was a Holocaust survivor. I'm telling your story. You should tell your story, no? Okay. 2 friends, Holocaust survivors, came to this country, opened a knitwear store on Allen Street, named after their last name, so Tusk, T, Pudlow, P, P&T Knitwear. I think that history and what you've continued here and brought back here is what makes this neighborhood so special. So thank you.
Firewall is recorded at my bookstore, P&T Knitwear, located at 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We'd love to hear from you with questions, feedbacks, or idea for a guest. Just email me at bradley@firewall.media or find me on LinkedIn. And to keep up with what's on my mind and my latest writing, please follow my new Substack at bradleytuss.substack.com. Thanks again for listening.